I read an article in the Eye this morning about the staffing situation going on in the workplace at the moment. This pandemic isn't over, of course, and the effect continues to provide some challenges to employers where they've got employees who are hesitant to return to offices, and they're kind of reluctant to give up their home-based lifestyles, and some have even taken time to reflect on their own careers. And this reflection is actually of more concern, I would imagine. In the US, I was reading, it's been branded the Great Resignation, with around 1/3 of staff looking to change their jobs or their careers in certain sectors. And UK employers are reporting a similar trend. So a recent report by a recruitment firm, Hansen Research, showed that 1/3 of PR workers, for example, are currently eyeing a career change. They're looking to change their jobs. And businesses are talking of a PTSD effect, as much like hospitality workers and people working in the service sectors, they've been traumatized by the last 18 months, and for good reason for some of the things that they've had to go through. But even in the short term, employers are struggling to get their staff back into the offices for the month that's starting this week, September. And this is probably unsurprising with the COVID infection rates increasing again in the UK. And some business will use a carrot and stick approach to try and get workers back, to this article said. And the carrot obviously is having more attractive office environments and financial incentives for office-based staff, whereas the stick itself might be something like a refusal to allow non-vaccinated staff back into improved workspaces. So I'm not getting into that part of it. But the question for me, for discussion or for your thought, is why are people so slow to get back into the workplace? Well, I wrote a few notes here just to try and sum up what I wanted to talk about. People are at home for health and economic and social reasons and technological reasons. Their health may they may have seen it, that they've been traumatized by the last 18 months, as the report said, and infections are still increasing, so they may fear catching it, of course. And many office-based workers spend upwards of, if you live in London, £1,390 for a season ticket to travel between Zone 1, Zone 5, or Zone 1, Zone 6, or something like that. That's how much it costs to travel within London. But outside of London, that can be as much as £7,000. That's how much it costs for me from where I live to get into London if I was commuting. Whilst it's an hour and 15 minutes on the train, it's £7,000. And then the social side is the trade-off between seeing people in the office and hanging out with people, and the banter and the social size and the social engagements, and you're balancing that off with the travel times and the time you're going to be on the train, the time you've got to get up in the morning, the times that you get home in the evening. Only the person that's making that call can actually know whether it's a benefit to them or not, to be fair. And then you've got the technology aspect, or technological aspect. I worked for a company where lots of people, I worked for a long time, 30 odd years, that see these headlines about remote workers and are thinking, what's the problem? I don't see why it's news. And I guess when you work for a big company, that's their main job is communication, then obviously it's normal for people in that industry. But for other people outside of that industry, it's harder. And I'll talk about that in a second. So obviously remote working, flexible working, hot desking, working from home are all things that are commonplace for companies like the company that I worked for, and lots of other companies. And then there's a lot of commentary at the moment in social media, in the papers, on the television, telling people that they must get back to work to support London businesses. Okay, but the average travel time a day in and out of London for people who don't live in London, it can be something like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on where you're traveling from within London to London, what side of London to the other. If you're using public transport in a car, it could take you a couple of hours. It used to take me 2 hours to get from Forest Hill to Chiswick every day. So it's 2 hours there, 2 hours back, honestly. Train is not that much quicker, but used to be able to get across London. If you're traveling from outside of London on the train, it can be anything from, they say on average 3 hours commute time per day per individual. So that's an hour and a half into London and an hour and a half out of London. 70% of the entire UK workforce commutes. So then you start to add that up and you look at the balance of that commute and working from home. 790,000 people per day commute into London. Yeah. And when you compare that to 8 million people, 8 million households in London where there are people of working age, it's not that much. It's more than 10%, but it's not the whole 8 million people. So I think the best thing for people, that, especially businesses that have people that are working at home and they're struggling to work from home, I think they've adapted it already, but there are things that you can do to become a person who can manage people that work remotely. So it's no longer about working from home and working remotely. It's as a business owner or a business leader, managing that person remotely. And there's lots of tools out there for you. So there are collaboration tools. I'm not going to mention them. Just look up the collaboration tools. I'm talking on one right now where I'm recording this for you. So there's lots of collaboration tools there. There's the technology that can help you. So getting a lease line rather than relying on broadband, which so many people, so many events that I've been on where somebody's broadband has failed because it was kind of slow to start with. They're not living right on top of the exchange where the broadband is being delivered from, or on what have you. So if it's important to you, then you can invest in something called a lease line. And a lease line is where all of the bandwidth is yours. So where people say that they've got broadband at home and they're getting 100 meg, they're not really getting 100 meg, it's illusion. I'm not getting into that. When you get a lease line, the whole 100 meg is yours, so it's unlikely to drop out, okay? Set expectations for the people that are working for you, working with you, the people that are working remotely. As a manager, you need to set some expectations and set some boundaries. Set up meetings in the mornings to review, set up meetings in the evening to review. See what you do in the mornings, what you're going to be doing for the day, the evening, what you've achieved. It's additional to what you would have done if people were working in the office, but in the office you may have had mini team meetings to kick the day off, meetings in the evenings. Continue to do those things, but use the technology. Set expectations. So when people are working from home, there's a little bit of flexibility in there. There's a reason why people work from home. Forgetting the pandemic. Before the pandemic happened, people worked at home for a variety of reasons. It could have been home care, it could have been the commute, it could have been anything. So you need to set expectations. How are you going to manage projects? How are you going to manage processes? Put the processes in place to help you to manage the projects that you might have for your business. Recruit people who can manage themselves. Sounds really silly, but when you recruited people, you recruited them to come into the office to work by themselves within the office, but it's a different skill set to work from home. A lot of people have had to adapt to it. I said about processes and train people and train them and connect with them. Connecting with them, you're going to speak to people more than you've spoken before. Sitting in your glass office and only coming out and speaking to people when you're having a coffee isn't going to do it now. So there's a responsibility for the employer to work with people remotely. The benefits for the employer are immense as well. I know people don't want to hear about it and they're talking about the economy, but why would you spend 60, 70, 80,000 pounds a year on square footage when you don't have to? You can invest that money somewhere else within your business to make it even more profitable. People working from home still have to do their jobs and you can measure the performance, and there's lots of KPIs that you can put in place to help individuals. But anyway, I thought I'd talk about that today because I do think sometimes people are making the headline the story rather than the detail behind it. Hope you have a fantastic bank holiday and I'll speak to you again soon.